Hi everybody, I'm Elizabeth Hines from ourpaleofamily.com, and today we are making something that has different names depending on where you live. So I'm from Ohio, and in Ohio we call this pot pies, and I now live in the South, and in the South this dish is called chicken and dumplings or chicken and pastry. But what it is basically is like a rich, flavorful chicken stew, and then you add these little dumplings, which mine are going to be the flat kind. You roll it out like it looks like a pie crust, whoops, and drop it into your simmering broth. And it's super rich and comforting. And I mean, we're in North Carolina, and it's cold here right now, and I know that some of you are experiencing much colder temperatures than we are, and I'm sorry about that. So I'm hoping that this really strikes a chord and is yummy and comforting for you. So the first thing we have to do is make our chicken and our yummy broth, the stew part of it, and I'm going to make it in the Instant Pot because this is a dish that would be, you know, kind of an all day on the stove kind of dish, and I want to do it quick. Now what I have here are six chicken thighs, bone in, skin on, and typically I would use the skin. I can't buy skinless with the bones at my store, so I have to get them either completely boneless and skinless or with the bones and the skin. There's a dish that I make that's called, I think, citrus chicken thighs. It has orange juice and Dijon mustard, and you make them like in a cast iron skillet. They go in the oven for a long time. They get really crispy. I want the skin on that because that's the skin gets nice and crispy and delicious. In the Instant Pot, nothing good is really going to come from this skin other than it's going to add some fat to keep with our mostly ketogenic ways around here. But I'm going to get some fat, some good fat in my dish in other ways. So I'm just going to take this skin off. It's going to make it easier for me. I don't want the skin in my finished dish anyway, so it's just going to be easier to get the meat off the bones if I get rid of the skin now. Okay, so you can see it's not really complicated. Just find a little foothold and pull it off. And there's some extra fat around the skin. You can go to the effort to take that off if you want or not. I've turned my Instant Pot on saute normal, and I've put about a tablespoon of oil in there. I'm going to season my chicken. I used avocado oil, which is a good oil for high heat applications. And in my little bowl over here that I'll grab in just a second, I have some poultry seasoning, half a teaspoon of poultry seasoning. That's really gross. Let me get rid of that. A half a teaspoon of sea salt and I'm going to say a half a teaspoon of pepper, but it's just some pepper. I just ground some pepper. And I mixed it up in a bowl like this so that I can just dip my fingers in it. And I knew I would have chicken hands. I want to go ahead and get some in here. I can smell my oil. I'm just going to let my chicken get a little brown on both sides. Now that I have this in there, I'll sprinkle seasoning on the back side and flip these over. The bone's going to help add some flavor to our stew, so I really want the bones in there. Skinless. I'm not even saying the right thing. Fresh chicken thighs, so not frozen. We'll cook in the Instant Pot in about 10 minutes. But dark meat really is very forgiving. You know, white meat, poultry will dry out very easily. Dark meat doesn't. You can really cook it for a long time. And I want to get some more of the goodness out of the bones, so I'm actually going to cook my chicken for 20 minutes. And it'll be done It'll be fine. It won't be dry. I really want it to sort of fall off the bone because that'll be easier for me. And it'll add some extra richness to my broth. Let me wash up. Okay, so let me just scoot that chicken to the side. And I'm going to start chopping my veggies that are going to make my stew so yummy and flavorful. I just have one Vidalia onion, organic Vidalia onion. Are y'all familiar with the Dirty Dozen, the 12 fruits and vegetables that are highest in pesticides? That it's recommended that you buy them organic if you can. And basically anything that's going to grow completely in the ground, a root vegetable, is going to be on that list. So that's what I have here. I have onions, celery, and carrots. And if you can afford it, and if you can find them, getting these 3 veggies organic is going to be better. Smells so good already. I just have a little dish over here to put my chicken in when it comes out. I just want to cut these roughly in the same size pieces. It just makes it nicer to eat that way. I want to say thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for the thumbs up and for making or leaving comments. Several of you have introduced yourselves, told me where you're from, and I'm so happy to hear from you and feel like I'm getting to know you a little bit. I know that some of you are struggling with a chronic illness. Diabetes is so common. I've heard from a couple of you that is what you're working on, and you need to cook. You know, it's really hard to eat well if you're eating out or you know, take out regularly. So I know you're working on your cooking skills, and that is really why I do this. I want to show you that cooking doesn't have to be hard, and it doesn't have to be messy usually, but it doesn't have to be a big, complicated ordeal. And that's what I hope by showing you these videos. You see how we just got a little bit of color on both sides. That's added flavor. I'm really cooking dinner for my family here. That's what you're seeing. This is what we're going to eat tonight. This is how I do it. I don't usually talk to a camera or talk to myself unless I'm making you a video. But this is how I cook dinner. Just put some stuff in the pan and then chop something else, and then get that in the pan and then chop the next thing. So with the food blog, my website where you'll find all these recipes, I have to write up the recipe, and I have to say, chop the carrots into 1/4-inch chunks, and chop the celery and chop the onions, and add them to the pan and saute for this amount of time. You know, I have to give you those instructions, but I think the video is so much more helpful because you can see it doesn't really have to be that specific. You know, it's just get it in there, chop it, stir it. It's much simpler than instructions often make it appear. So this is big celery, but sometimes the celery is pretty tiny. This is a big one. So I'm just going to slice down, and then I'm going to slice it again, because again, I do want all my little chunks to be about the same size. So my onion, my carrot, and then my celery is going to be about the same. So they're about the same size. They'll cook evenly that way. And it just makes it easier to eat. So I'm glad you're here. If you haven't subscribed already, I'd love it if you would do that. I think I'm right at 3,000 subscribers, which is really amazing to me. I'm so thankful. I really am thankful. And I think I'm going to do some kind of giveaway. I'm trying to figure out what that should be. I have some favorite cookbooks that I really highly recommend. You know, we follow a paleo diet. I would say obviously. I think that's obvious based on the name of my website. And it may not be to everyone. I know some people come here for the Instant Pot. This is going to get quieter in a second. I'll show you the chicken. So this has a little bit of color. Some of that color, honestly, is from the poultry seasoning. Let me just start scooping that in. I don't want to throw it in or drop it in from too high and have it splatter. Forgot what I was saying. So we're paleo, so my favorite cookbooks that I would recommend would be paleo cookbooks. So thinking about maybe sending you one of those. I also, today is January 30th, and last February 1st, I started my functional medicine health coach training with the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy, and that means that I graduate tomorrow. It has been a really great year. It's been a long year, a really busy year, but a great year. I'm very, very thankful. I've learned so much. And I'm ready. I'm legal. I'm ready to start coaching. Keep getting little pieces of onion skin in there. So I'm thinking I'll probably give away some coaching sessions as well. And I need a spoon. I'll give that a stir, and then I'll chop up my last stalk of celery. So anyway, subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, and I'll come up with some sort of giveaway for you. Maybe a gift card to Thrive Market. You know I talk about Thrive all the time. I love Thrive. I just got a box today, sitting there on the floor, full of all kinds of goodies. That would be good. Would you like that? Okay. Last stalk of celery. I did wash these. Even though they're organic, I still washed them because they grow in the ground, and celery in particular is a dirty vegetable. It takes a while to get it clean. I could have probably gotten away with 2 stalks, but we'll do 3. It won't hurt you have 3. So you know this is going to be better if you have homemade bone broth. But if you do not, take some time and find a good one from the store that you like. In case you haven't noticed, bone broth is very popular these days. Very, very popular. I'm going to turn this up, so I have to turn it off and then adjust it up to high. Bone broth is extremely popular, and you can find all sorts of cartons, cans, frozen. You can find some bone broth at the store that can substitute for homemade if you don't have the time or you don't want to take the time. Look, that's fine. We all make choices, right? People think I cook from scratch all the time, and I do cook from scratch most of the time, but not all of the time. There are some things I choose to buy, and one of them is cauliflower rice. I buy cauliflower rice, but I make my broth because it's easy for me. It doesn't bother me. I do it in my Instant Pot. It's super fast. I'm going to pour this broth in here just because I want to know how much I have so I can write my recipe accurately. I have these little containers that I freeze, and I thought it was about 2 cups, and look at that. It's exactly 2 cups. Look how rich that is. I'm so excited for that broth. Now, in essence, we're making broth by cooking some meat with bones, but I'm not cooking it long enough to get really good, rich, flavorful broth. So I'm giving it a head start with that 1 carton of broth. I haven't done this before, so this is a teeny bit of an experiment, but I made some, what was the last one I put up? The chicken, the white chicken chili. Had the can of coconut milk in it. It was so creamy and delicious, and it did not taste like coconut, and we all really loved it. And so I'm thinking I'm going to do that again to get that creaminess. So this was one of my goodies that came from Thrive today. Okay, so I'm letting this go for a few minutes because I put a lot of vegetables in there. I just want them to cook a teeny bit, and I'm going to add that chicken back in. I'm getting better at not banging my spoon. Have you noticed? Okay, so let me just tell you how we're going to make our dumplings, and I'll get started on that. So I've been working on getting this recipe to be more almond flour and less starch. So the two starches that will work for this type of pot pie or pastry, dumpling, whatever, are the stickier or the more stretchy glutinous-like starches. So that would be cassava flour or tapioca starch. Both of them have some side effects if you eat a lot of them. They can make you really constipated. I know that's not a pretty word. We don't want to talk about that when we're eating, but I'm cooking now and I'm just trying to be honest with you so you know what you're getting into. Some people actually react to tapioca. They're from the same plant, actually. It's just processed differently. Cassava flour, I think, has a flavor, a strong taste that I do not care for. Tapioca, if the recipe has enough tapioca, it has some of that flavor, but it's not as strong. So I've been reducing the tapioca and increasing the almond to try to get a pastry that still works. Like my pie crust, which is almond and arrowroot, that completely dissolves and turns to mush in this application. So unfortunately it doesn't work very well. So we want it to be able to be like a boiled dumpling and maintain its integrity. Okay, these veggies are where I want them. I'm gonna get this chicken back in. Because there were a little bit of juices in there. I'm adding 2 cups of broth, that really rich, flavorful broth. So good. Yikes. I'm really kind of a mess in the kitchen. Okay. Real carefully try to break through that cream. Get the milk or the water. All that cream is at the top. It's cold right now, so the cream is at the top. If this were summertime, the cream may be mixed in with the water, which since I'm using the whole can, that's no problem. But a lot of times I just want the cream for a recipe, and so I'll stick a can in my fridge. I'm going to rinse this out, and this is the water that I'm adding. I think that's a 15-ounce can. Let me just make sure. 13.5 ounces. And let me give this a little stir. It's thick and rich already. We don't have to add any sort of thickener because the pastry will do that for us. So just spin that around. I'm going to give it a quick taste and make sure my broth is salty enough. It needs more. Usually my broth when I make it, I do not make it too salty because I don't know how I'm going to use it. Sometimes somebody just drinks it when they're sick, and I just don't want it too salty. I can always add more. Pepper. Okay, let me give that another little stir. We need to turn it off. And I got a piece of pepper in my throat. Oh, it's gonna make me cough. Seal, and we want, I know some of them now have a pressure button for your pressure level. Mine says manual, so I just hit manual. And I only want 20 minutes, so I've got to hit my minus button to get down to 20. Okay, that's probably gonna take about 10 minutes to come up to pressure. Let me actually, I'm trying to start my stopwatch so that wrong one, so that I know exactly how much time it takes to come up to pressure, so I can write that accurately in my my recipe. Okay, so I know I was talking about the starches, and so it's a fine balance. That's why, you know, somebody who works to create a recipe like I do, and then a bunch of people comment and say, oh, can you substitute this, can you substitute that? Well, you can try. You can rest assured that before you see a recipe written up, it's been tested and tried a lot of times, and whoever wrote it has experimented a lot to try to get it exactly right. And when you just start subbing out different ingredients, it may not work right, especially when you're following a specialty diet. And this one's not going to fit. Let me get my half cup. So I had 2 cups of almond flour, 1 cup of tapioca. When you're using these specialty flours and you're not using, you know, regular white flour and sugar and that kind of thing. So we're trying to stay healthy and still eat really good food. This is something that I loved. It was my comfort food dish. If ever I was sick, I wanted pot pie. My mom used to make it a good bit. We all loved it. She didn't do this with the, I don't remember that we had it with chicken in it. I feel like it was just the broth with the pot pie in it. But there may have been, you know, little bits of chicken or turkey. You know, after she cooked it, she would have cooked the bones and made the broth, and then she would have gotten every bit of meat off of those bones, which now once I make broth, I don't keep any meat that's off of those bones because it's cooked for so long. The meat is very powdery, very, very dry. But Mom sure did. We didn't have a lot of money, so we were very resourceful. I say we. It wasn't me. It was my parents. So then we have a teaspoon and a half. My half was dirty, so this is a quarter of baking powder and a half a teaspoon of salt. And that's my dry. I just realized I don't have my eggs. This is going to make a lot of the pastry. I should have told you that. I'm doubling the recipe because some people, let's say I'm doubling the recipe. I'm making twice as much as you really need, but it freezes really well, and then you don't have to go through this process next time. Or you might want lots of pastry. Some people want more and some people want less. So you have some flexibility. So next I need to crack some eggs in here. So I need to fetch my eggs. Okay, so we need 3 large eggs. Now I'm going to do a fork. So this used to be, I was telling a friend of mine about this today. The recipe was 1 cup of flour, 1 egg, a tablespoon of Crisco, some baking powder, some salt, and then you mix that up and add just enough water to get it to come together. That was the recipe for pot pies. So we don't have that Crisco in anymore. Do any of you have backyard chickens? I would love to have chickens. My husband, not so much, which is why we don't have them. So I'm kind of making a well in the center. I just think it would be really nice to have something natural out there, something alive that I want out there pecking the ground. I think you can feed them kitchen scraps. Can you not? Correct me if I'm wrong about that. Both sets of my grandparents were farmers. I spent a lot of time with them, so I consider myself partly a farmer, but there is a lot that I don't know. Okay, so I'm just going to add a little pepper just because I want to. We like black pepper. I think it'll look pretty in there. You don't have to. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of beat up my eggs right there in the well. And they're getting beat up. So I cracked my eggs individually. I don't always do this because sometimes I just forget. Sometimes I get lazy. But I do try to crack my eggs into something before I add them into my dish and make sure they're good, because sometimes you do get a bad egg, and if I were to dump it in there, then I would have ruined all of my ingredients. And these specialty ingredients are expensive. So I was in line at Costco the other day buying a new bag of almond flour. That's all I had. And the lady in line behind me said, "Oh, you know, what's so special about that flour?" She just saw the blanched. She's like, "What's blanched flour?" And then she saw the almond. She's like, oh, you know, what's so special about that? Why do you use that? And it just occurred to me that it's been so long that we've been gluten-free, paleo. I'm just used to it. I kind of take it for granted. There are a lot of people who are interested in making some of these changes to their diet, and they just don't know. They're not familiar with the ingredients. It's a different way of cooking, and I recognize that I am unusual in that I enjoy cooking. I really grew up cooking. It's part of my DNA. But I know that that's unusual. So that's why I'm doing these videos. I'm hoping that you'll learn something. I love my Apple Watch, but sometimes I get a lot of notifications and it really drives me crazy. I need a little water, my big hands. If my chicken was done and it was boiling away over there, I would have used broth, but I don't have any extra broth sitting here, so just put in a little water and that's fine. So I just want to bring this together. It was maybe a tablespoon. It's going to vary a little bit how much you need based on how big your, I almost said onions, how big your eggs are. You know, I always use large eggs, but sometimes they're larger than others. And look how yellow this is. It was not this yellow last time I made this. I noticed I had eggs for lunch today. The yolks in this particular batch of eggs are really nice and yellow. So my pastry is nice and yellow. All right, I'm gonna actually switch to arrowroot to roll out my pastry. You don't have to. You could certainly use the, I would use the almond flour. I mean, you could, but I wouldn't. It just doesn't do very well in when you boil it. That's my friend I was talking about. I guess she's making this. I hope it turns out for her. Okay. There we go. So it was 9 minutes exactly for that to come up to pressure. 9 minutes. This looks like it used to look when my mom made it. It's very yellow. It's so funny. It must have had some weakling little eggs the last time. The last few times I made this, I guess. I'll get just a little bit more. Okay, oops, there's my rubber band. I actually want the extra starch on the outside because it will help to thicken my broth, which is what I want. I've said that many times. I like gravy. I like a thick sauce. Now, how long it takes these to cook depends on how thick you make them, how big you make them. I don't know why. It's probably the way her mother or grandmother did it. Well, in reality, it would have been her grandmother. My mom's mom did not cook very much, but her grandmother did. She lived with them. And so this is probably how big she made them. They were about 1.5 inches to 2 inches square, which is really big. Then you really have to cut that or just take a really big bite, which I don't care to take such large bites. But maybe you do, that's fine. So I'm gonna cut mine a little bit smaller. My kids actually requested when I told them this is what we were making tonight, they said, please make them smaller, more bite size. So, okay, I can do that, no problem. I'm just sort of scraping along, making sure this is not stuck to my counter. This is my bench scraper. It's one of my indispensable kitchen tools. Highly, highly recommend you have one of those. Let me clean up a teeny bit. I should say that I rolled out my pastry. I'm going to sprinkle just a teeny bit on top. That way once I cut it, it'll be, they'll be able to separate from one another. I rolled out my pastry right on my countertop. This is granite. If you do not have a natural stone countertop, or I guess some man-made stones too, you can cut on. Use like a pastry mat or however you roll out a pie crust, that sort of thing. Something to protect your countertops. But I can roll and cut. My kids are doing the dishes, which is great. They don't always put things away correctly. My drawers get, things are adjusted in there in a funny way. And so they get stuck. So I'm using my old Pampered Chef pizza cutter because that just makes it super fast. And I'm going to aim to cut these in about 1/2 inch squares. And then I'll just leave them sit on my counter until I'm ready, till my chicken is done, and then I'll drop my pastry in. And I'll put in as many as I want, and then I'll take the rest and I'll put them on a small cookie sheet and I'll put them in the freezer and let them freeze solid. And then I'll put them in a bag. and just keep them in there for, actually the other night we had kind of a big late lunch, and everybody was just eating a little bit whatever they wanted on their own, and I just wanted soup. It was cold, so I thawed myself one of those little cubes of broth. I dropped in some of my pot pies that I had in the freezer, and I had the delicious soup. It's making me dizzy looking at these lines. It's crazy. Probably because I got my bifocal contacts in, and I'm looking right at the line between my distance vision and my magnified vision. La-ti-da, the joys of getting older. Okay, so that's it. When I'm ready to drop them in, I'll just use my bench scraper and pick some up, stick them in. So these can just sit here. This is like homemade noodles. Did anybody used to make noodles or still make noodles? My grandma made noodles. It was my favorite thing at Thanksgiving, her homemade noodles and her yummy homemade broth. Okay, so we have 18 minutes left on there. I'll let the pressure come down naturally for just a couple minutes, then I'll release it. I'll fish that chicken out. I'll get the meat off of the bones, add that back in, add my pot pie in, let them start bubbling away. Okay, see you in a few minutes. Okay, our 20 minutes is up, and I just released the pressure. I let it go for a couple minutes. I think I started at 3, so that means it took 4 minutes for that pressure to come down. That's a long time. Alright, so I'm going to turn this off. It's bubbling away off, but I'm going to turn saute on because I want it to keep boiling. I'm going to fish out the chicken. Try not to get a bunch of the vegetables. There'll be a few, but that's fine. The chicken skin is a good source of omega-6 fats. You've probably heard a lot of omega-3s. Omega-3s are the really heart-protected ones, but your body uses the 6s as well, so there's value there, but you want more 3 than 6. Does that make sense? So if I would have left the skin on my chicken, it would have been fine. I would have pulled it off because it would just be a soggy mess. We're not going to want to eat that in this application, but it would have added a lot of omega-6 fats to my broth as opposed to the coconut, which now that I'm saying that I need to confirm. Remember, the coconut milk has saturated fat, which is actually fine for us, but I need to confirm. I just was thinking it was omegas, but I could be wrong. Okay, so I did a little boil check on these while my chicken was cooking because I keep messing with the ratio of almond flour to tapioca or cassava, wanting to add more almond. And with more almond, less tapioca, the dumplings definitely cook faster. So when I had the reverse ratio, 2 cups of cassava or tapioca to 1 cup almond, it took about 10 minutes for my dumplings to cook. These took 2 minutes to cook. So I'm going to try to shred my chicken, get that back in, but I think my dumplings are going to be ready before I'm ready. But that's okay. I can turn it off. They'll be fine. The chicken, in my opinion, is really done perfectly. I checked a bunch of different sources, websites, and most said dark meat chicken parts, which would be what we have here, it's not a whole chicken, would cook in 10 minutes. The Instant Pot instruction manual actually said 10 to 15, and I did 20 if you recall, and I really think this is perfect. It's coming off the bone really easily, which is what I wanted. I'm actually going to just turn this off while I finish getting my chicken And I have this bowl here because, ooh, it's so hot. I want to save my bones, and I'll cook them when I make broth next time, because there's really a lot of good nutrition in those bones. I didn't cook this long enough to get all the minerals out, so I'll throw them in the next time I make broth. These are really meaty thighs. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they have a lot more fat than meat. These are really nice ones, and I'm not gonna fuss with getting every little bit off, just in the interest of time right now. Let me taste a piece. It's really good. It's seasoned really well. I like dark meat so much better than white meat chicken. White meat has its place. I get it. We eat it. But I really like the flavor of dark meat so much better. And I hope y'all know by now we don't have to be afraid of fat. But even if you still are following more of a low-fat diet, dark meat does not have that much more fat than white meat, so it's really fine. Let me get that out of there because of all these vegetables in here. I want to just stir them in. I had somebody actually request this recipe. I think his name is Michael, to go back and look. I had just started working on it when he requested it. It's like, well, what do you know? It's what I'm working on right now. If you have a request for a recipe that you love, that you're trying to make healthier, whether it's paleo or keto, you know, we're not gonna veer too far out of that because we don't eat gluten. We do eat some dairy, so we can do, that's called primal. So we can do primal. I'll work on that kind of recipe for you. So if you have a request for something that you're missing that you'd really love to have again, I would be happy to try to make a paleo version of it for you. Just leave me a comment. Let me know. I would love to know if any of you are homeschoolers as well. Just make me happy to know. Yeah, any homeschoolers out there? We've homeschooled ever since my oldest child was in kindergarten. So we're lifelong homeschoolers and just love it. It's been the biggest blessing to our family. My kids are learning to cook. They cooked Tuesday night. They made hot dogs and French fries and okra. That was pretty good. I'm going to turn this back on, saute. I'm going to put a little piece of parchment on my tray just so these don't stick. And I think I'm going to freeze the rest of these dumplings for some sick day soup. All this leftover flour, I'll just dump it in there. Let me give this a stir around. I'm going to taste it for seasoning. Make sure it doesn't taste like coconut. I know somebody's going to ask. Coconut is obviously a very polarizing ingredient. Let's give this, I just want to taste the broth. It's really good. Really, really good. And a dumpling. Get a little piece of chicken. Some veggies. Okay, so there is a little essence of coconut. It's not coconutty. Does that make sense? It doesn't taste tropical or anything. About 1/4 teaspoon more. Just a little bit of pepper. That's it. Really good, warm, comforting. My dumplings are not falling apart. They're just right now. Let me ladle this up. Take a picture of this. The recipe will be up on the website for you. I'm so happy to have this. My dad asked for this not too long ago. He is now following a gluten-free diet, which means my mom is too at home. Oh, I can't wait to dig into this. So this is, depending on where you're from, this is pot pies, chicken and pastry, chicken and dumplings. But no matter what you call it, it's delicious. I hope you make this one and enjoy it and see that it wasn't super complicated. You could easily put all of these dumplings in or reserve some in your freezer for when you just want a little bowl of comfort, or if somebody's sick, it would be perfect. So thanks for tuning in. Again, thank you for leaving a comment, thumbs up, subscribing. I will do a giveaway. I'll make a little goodie package, and I'll tell you for sure what that is in my next video. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate you sharing and passing along my videos. Thanks. Good night.